Hi there, my name is Taiwo, and this is New Creation Life. Amen. I just wanted to put a bit of an accent on prayer, particularly prayer as it concerns Christians. Christians praying for Christians, brother praying for brother. Okay? Amen. So let me take you to 2 Corinthians chapter 1 from verse 8. 2 Corinthians 1 8. This is Paul saying something to the Corinthians. For we will not, brethren, have you ignorant of our trouble which came to us in Asia. So he had trouble. I want you to know about the trouble we went through in Asia, that we were pressed out of measure, we were pressed above strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life. We despaired even of life. In other words, that means we thought maybe the situation was so bad, we thought it's better to die than to keep going on in this situation. That's what it means to despair even of life. To be like, you know what, I'd rather die. It's better. Sometimes people have pain where they just say, you know what? This pain is so unbearable. I would rather die. People say that. All right. Look at what the Living New Testament says about that same verse. It says, we were really crushed. We were overwhelmed and we feared we will never live through it. In other words, we thought we were going to die. In verse 9 of the same translation, it says, we felt we were doomed to die. And we saw how powerless we were to help ourselves. We felt we were doomed to die. The King James of that same verse says, we had the sentence of death in ourselves. In short, Paul is saying the situation was so bad, we thought we were going to die. In other words, his physical life was in danger, in mortal danger. People go through this all the time. So of course, we know that Paul was a missionary, did a lot of traveling, so his life was in danger. We don't know exactly what kind of danger he's talking about here, but we know from the book of Acts, from his missionary journeys, the details. We know that he went through so many things: persecution from the Jews, persecution from Gentiles. He was shipwrecked. He was stoned and left for dead a number of times. He was led through a window. Even later on in 2 Corinthians, it tells about some of his trouble, in dangers of false brothers, dangers of the Jews, dangers of animals, wild animals, in wilderness, in shipwrecked in the sea for days, and stuff like that. Okay, so let's look at verse 10. Let me read 9 again. But we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead. In other words, we were as good as dead. We trusted in God who raises the dead. Do you see that? We trusted in God who raises the dead. In other words, we were just sure this was going to die. We were going to die. This was death. So we just know that God can raise the dead. Essentially, he's saying it was that bad. Okay, look at it. Verse 10. And God delivered us from so great a death. The Living New Testament says, God delivered us and saved us from a terrible death. In other words, if they had died, it would not have been the death of somebody slept and did not wake up or died in his sleep. No, it will have been a terrible, terrible death. That's what it says here. And then we expect him to do it again and again. So there is faith there. It was not like that Paul was out of faith. He said he delivered us. He will do it again and again. We know that. And then the curious thing is where I'm going now in verse 11. Verse 11 is where I'm really going, where it concerns prayer. And Paul says here in verse 11 of the Living New Testament, you must help us too by your prayer for us. In other words, he's associating, he's relating, being delivered from that situation is relating it to the prayer of the saints. That's the point. Look at verse 11 in the King James. It says, you also helping together by your prayer for us. By your prayer for us. Actually, you know what? The Message translation has a very interesting translation for this same verse. This is the way he put it. He said in verse 11, it says, you were part of the rescue operation. That immediately associates that, okay, God delivered us. It says that in verse 10. God did deliver us from this great death that will have happened to us. And he said, you also were part of the rescue operation. In other words, he is relating that deliverance that they enjoyed, that they had from God. He's relating it to the prayers of the saints. Imagine that Paul had died in this tragedy, in this situation. Imagine that his team had died in this situation. People will have said, he was a good man. Paul, the Apostle Paul, the man of faith, oh my goodness, he was a good man. Why do bad things happen to good people? That's what Christians will have said. But the thing is, it seems as if Paul is implying here that prayer can prevent tragedy. Prayer does prevent tragedy. You can see it here. That's what he's implying here. He says, help us by praying for us. You also helping us together by your prayers for us. And he says, when you do that, it will bring thanksgiving to God. Look at the rest of verse 11. In the Revised Standard Version, it says, you also must help us by prayer so that many will give thanks on our behalf for the blessing granted us in answer to many prayers, in answer to the prayer of deliverance that we had. You have to see it, that it was the prayers of the saints that helped in this deliverance. In this deliverance, God did deliver, but Paul here is associating that deliverance to the prayers of the saints. Or he's saying at the very least, Paul is implying that the prayers of the saints made or could have made that situation better.